confronted my family about being treated like an ATM in taxi, then disappeared. I've been married for 15 years and have 3 daughters, aged 17, 14, and 11. I've known my wife since I was 8 years old. She was my first crush, my first love, and for a long time, my best friend. I built my life around her, believing we'd always cherish the connection we had. But somewhere along the way, things changed. While I love my family deeply, I've grown tired of feeling invisible in my own home. To them, I'm nothing more than an ATM and a taxi service. The realization crept up on me over the years, like water eroding a rock. I brushed it off at first, convincing myself that it was just a phase. But the signs were everywhere. My wife hadn't kissed me in 6 months, hadn't told me she loved me in over 5 years. Every attempt I made to reconnect, to plan a meaningful evening, or to share a moment was met with indifference or outright dismissal. Father's Day was the breaking point. I woke up to an empty house, confused and hopeful that maybe they were out getting something special for me. Hours passed. Then, I found out they had spent the day at a spa and dined at one of my favorite restaurants without me. Not a single acknowledgement of the day. Not even a happy Father's Day. I brushed it off as best I could, thinking, maybe they'll make it up to me on my birthday. But when my birthday came, it was the same story. I suggested plans, but they were dismissed without a second thought. That evening, I sat alone while my family stayed glued to their phones. It was as though I didn't exist. By Thursday night, my frustration boiled over. My wife made a dismissive comment in bed, and something inside me snapped. I turned to her, voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "When was the last time we kissed?" She looked at me, confused. "I don't know. Does it matter?" "When was the last time we had sex?" Her face reddened. "You're overreacting." "When was the last time you told me you loved me?" Her answers were dismissive, filled with excuses, or outright wrong. I poured my heart out, crying and raising my voice for the first time in years. I pleaded with her to see me, to hear me. "If I'm invisible to you," I said, "then fine. You don't have to pretend anymore." And with that, I left the house. I spent the next few days in a haze, unsure of what to do. I left one message for my daughters, letting them know I loved them. My wife sent a short apology, but it felt hollow, like a box checked off a list. For the first time in my life, I turned to alcohol, hoping it would numb the pain. Thankfully, I stopped myself before it became something worse. Instead, I sought help through my workplace, connecting with a therapist and legal counsel. When I missed my daughter's extracurricular events, they began to sense something was wrong. They reached out, worried and confused. Their concern tugged at my heart. Despite everything, they were still my daughters, and I couldn't bear to see them suffer. My wife eventually suggested we meet to talk. I agreed, on the condition that we speak alone. But when I arrived, she had brought the kids another instance of my feelings being ignored. I didn't hide my disappointment. I laid everything out. How their behavior had made me feel unloved, how her apologies felt insincere, and how I couldn't continue like this. Then I presented her with 2 options: a folder containing separation papers, a list of therapy referrals for both individual and couples counseling. I made it clear, if we stayed together, significant changes were non-negotiable. To my surprise, she scheduled therapy. Back at home, I adopted the gray rock method, detaching emotionally and focusing on my own healing. I slept in a separate room, creating physical and emotional space. Small changes started to appear, but I remained skeptical. On the second night back, she approached me, attempting to initiate intimacy. I gently but firmly refused. "We need to rebuild trust," I told her. "We need to work through our issues before anything else." For the first time in years, I was prioritizing my needs. It felt both liberating and terrifying. My youngest daughter, with her unconditional love and persistence, became a beacon of hope for me. Her hugs, her smiles, they reminded me that I was still needed, still valued. Therapy became a lifeline. My therapist helped me unpack years of suppressed emotions, comparing my journey to shedding a mask I had worn for far too long. In our joint sessions, my wife began to open up. She admitted that she had mentally checked out of the marriage after my mom passed away, overwhelmed by her own struggles. While I appreciated her honesty, it wasn't enough to erase the years of hurt. Our third therapy session was a turning point. I shared my darkest thoughts, including moments when I had contemplated ending it all. My wife's reaction shocked me. She looked horrified, then angry, calling me selfish. The therapist intervened, helping her understand the depth of my pain. I reminded her of the times she had ignored me on Father's Day, my birthday, and how those moments had contributed to my despair. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of remorse in her eyes. She broke down, apologizing for not recognizing how bad things had gotten. She vowed to be a better partner, but I couldn't help but wonder if her promises were genuine or simply an attempt to keep the family intact. Outside of therapy, I began rebuilding my life piece by piece. I reconnected with hobbies I had abandoned, spent quality time with my daughters, and leaned on a small but supportive circle of friends. My wife made efforts, too, planning a date night, leaving me thoughtful notes, but it all felt too little, too late. I couldn't shake the feeling that her gestures were more about repairing her image than truly understanding my pain. As I worked through my emotions, a new complication arose. My mother had left her abusive husband of 14 years and rekindled a relationship with my estranged biological father. The man who had rejected me countless times, who had failed me when I needed him most, was now being welcomed back into her life. My grandparents, who had adopted me and raised me as their own, were livid. My grandfather, in particular, couldn't forgive the man who had caused so much pain. I found myself caught in the middle, grappling with conflicting emotions. Could I forgive my father? Did I even want to? Through it all, I've come to realize that healing isn't linear. Some days, I feel hopeful. Other days, the weight of it all feels unbearable. But I'm learning to prioritize myself, to set boundaries, and to demand the respect I deserve. Whether my marriage survives or not, one thing is clear. I won't settle for invisibility any longer. I deserve to be seen, to be heard, and to be loved, not just as a husband and father, but as a person. What stings the most isn't just the betrayal. It's the audacity of my mom to paint my father as some kind of changed man. Over and over, she tells me he regrets his past and that I should give him another chance. She pushes reconciliation like it's a magic cure for years of neglect and hurt. But how do you reconcile with someone who never tried to be there for you? How do you forgive a man who raised other children with love and care while blatantly ignoring your existence? I can't shake the image of my mom standing by his side, acting like they're some kind of happy, united couple. Out of all the men in the world, she chose him, the man who abandoned me. And she expects me to just go along with it, like none of it matters. Each time she brings it up, it feels like a slap in the face, a painful reminder that my feelings seem to come last. What makes it even worse is my grandmother's involvement. She was my rock, my constant source of comfort when everything else felt chaotic. I confided in her because I thought she would always be honest with me. But she lied. She was meeting with my biological father behind my back, something that felt so unlike her. When I found out, it felt like another rug being pulled out from under me. It hurt in a way I didn't think it could because I trusted her. And while I understand she might have been trying to mend fences for the family, it doesn't excuse the betrayal. Despite all of this, there's a part of me that feels guilty. I want my mom to be happy. Truly, I do. I've seen her struggle with loneliness, and it's hard to watch someone you love go through that. But does her happiness have to come at the cost of mine? Does she really need to build a life with the man who caused so much damage? Every time I try to think about her side of things, I end up spiraling into the same feeling of frustration and heartbreak. At least my grandfather gets it. He's always been blunt about his feelings, and he doesn't hide his disapproval of my mom's choices. It's comforting to know that someone in the family understands where I'm coming from. But the rest of them? They've embraced the situation. They've welcomed my biological father into the fold like he's a long-lost relative who's finally come home. It's maddening. They act like my objections are baseless, like I'm the unreasonable one for not wanting to play happy family. A little over a year ago, I shared my struggles with this situation. Back then, I was grappling with my mom's budding relationship with my biological father and the pressure she was putting on me to accept him. Since then, things have only escalated. My mom and father have gotten married. That's right, they tied the knot. And they didn't even bother to tell me. I found out after the fact, like I was some distant acquaintance instead of her child. Before the wedding, my mom continued her campaign to get me to build a relationship with him, and, to my surprise, with his other children too. She expected me to embrace them as siblings, to share moments and memories with the people who benefited from the love and attention I never got. It was too much. I felt suffocated by her constant calls and guilt trips. So, I made a decision. I moved to the West Coast for work and went no contact with her for a few months. I needed space to process everything, to figure out how to navigate this storm of emotions without losing myself. During those months of silence, they got married. When I eventually reached out to my mom, I thought maybe we could have a real conversation. Maybe she would finally listen to me, hear my side, and understand the pain I was feeling. Instead, she dismissed me. She brushed off my feelings as if they were insignificant. She gaslighted me, telling me I needed to forgive and forget, as if that was the simple solution to years of abandonment and betrayal. That conversation was the breaking point. It was the moment I realized she wasn't going to change. She wasn't going to prioritize my feelings or respect my boundaries. I knew I had to make a choice, one that would protect my peace and sanity. So, I cut all ties with her and her new family. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. I needed to stop subjecting myself to the constant cycle of hurt and disappointment. Since then, my life has improved in ways I didn't expect. The weight of their expectations and manipulation is gone, and I feel lighter. My stress levels have plummeted, and my anxiety, which used to feel like a constant companion, has faded into the background. I've been able to focus on myself, on my career, my hobbies, and my happiness. It hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows, of course. Some friends and family members have voiced their disapproval of my choice. They say I'm being too harsh, that I should give my mom another chance. But others have been incredibly supportive. They've validated my feelings, reminding me that it's okay to set boundaries, even with family. They've helped me see that I deserve peace, even if it means walking away from people who refuse to respect me. Looking back, I realize how much I've grown through this ordeal. It's taught me the importance of self-respect and the power of saying no. I've learned that I don't have to tolerate toxic relationships, no matter who the person is. Family doesn't get a free pass to hurt you repeatedly just because you share DNA. Do I miss my mom? Of course. There are days when I think about calling her, when I wonder if things could be different. But then I remember the countless times she dismissed my feelings, the way she chose my biological father over me. And I remind myself why I made the decision to cut ties. It wasn't out of spite or anger, it was out of self-preservation. As for my biological father, I've come to terms with the fact that we'll never have a relationship, and I'm okay with that. I've built a life that doesn't include him, and I don't feel the need to force a connection that was never there to begin with. His other children may have gotten the father I didn't, but that's their story, not mine. Moving forward, I'm focusing on the things and people that bring me joy. I've made incredible friends on the West Coast who feel more like family than some of my actual relatives. I've thrown myself into my work, pouring my energy into projects that excite me. And most importantly, I'm learning to let go of the guilt. I've spent so much of my life putting others' happiness before my own, and it's time to change that. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is walk away. It's painful and lonely, and it makes you question yourself. But in my case, it was the best decision I could have made. I finally found peace, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm living for myself, not for anyone else. To anyone out there struggling with similar family dynamics, I want you to know this. It's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to prioritize your mental health and happiness. You're not obligated to keep people in your life just because they're family. You deserve love, respect, and peace. And sometimes, the only way to find that is to let go. As I continue to heal and grow, I hold on to the hope that maybe, one day, my mom will truly understand the depth of my hurt. Maybe she'll see that her choices had consequences, that her actions pushed me away. But until then, I'll keep moving forward, building a life that feels right for me.